welcome to the final edition of the Capital Conversation podcast for our senior year of school at HRA. I think, speaking on behalf of both James and myself, that we've really enjoyed doing this project and taking a deeper dive into politics than we had in past years. Although it was something that we were always interested in, we definitely found ourselves expanding our viewpoints this year and paying a lot more attention to what was going on in the world and kind of breaking it down, but discussing things with our teachers and more advanced note than we normally would, being more proactive in starting those conversations with people like Mr. Haley. We enjoyed the experiences of talking to the various individuals that we interviewed, and thought we learned a lot about how the world changed. So we figured we'd take this time to thank the people that we owe thank yous to, talk about what we learned and what we enjoyed about those interviews, and also talk about what we think is going to happen in the next 6 months of politics as we start to head off to college, and obviously the world is changing a great deal.
Yeah, so thank yous first, I think, are in order, are to, in no particular order, Mayor Joe Frank, Mrs. Spees, our English teacher from last year, Secretary Hagel and Dr. Staples for taking time out of their busy schedules to be with us, and David Camp and Frank for letting us film here and giving us a place to do our project, which is all very helpful.
Yeah, and Mr. Haley for sure.
Yeah, Mr. Haley, Miss Lassiter as well.
He's been a great advisor. We enjoyed just every day going into Gov class and getting to have conversations with him about politics. I mean, he certainly has been very patient with us, and we've had some great discourse with him. We miss certainly getting to go into class every day. I think that certainly is one of the things that I miss the most about the fact that we're in online school now and that the world is shut down by this coronavirus is, getting to go in and have that discourse with teachers like him about politics and, where his head is at on various things. So.
Yeah. So just a long-term picture, wrap it up, predictions for what I think is going to happen in the future. I think through the end of this year, coronavirus is going to slowly get less lethal, less intimidating. I think ultimately we'll reopen the economy before the election, not fully, but to an extent that Trump can say, we handled the coronavirus, we got through the worst of it, and through my leadership, the country's on the right path again. I think there'll still be social distancing in measure. I think Joe Biden will continue to make mistakes on the campaign trail. I think he'll make a poor choice for VP. I think he'll have gaffes leading up to the election. I think on the debate stage, Trump's going to do circles around him pretty much. And I think there's going to be in-person voting in November with social distancing measures, so I don't think there's going to be an increase in absentee voting or mail-in voting.
So give me a name, VP-wise. Who do you think?
I think he's going to pick Stacey Abrams, which I think is a bad pick. But that's what I think is going to happen. And I think Trump wins the states he's supposed to win pretty easily. I think Biden wins the states he's supposed to win pretty easily. I think battleground states are closer than a lot of people are expecting. I think right now Biden's ahead in a lot of them. And I think Biden takes back 1 or 2 states on the Rust Belt, but I think Trump pulls out Pennsylvania, Florida, and North Carolina, and wins the election in maybe a big electoral vote, but I think looking back on it, people will say the coronavirus ultimately tightened the race more than it would have otherwise because it kept Joe out of the public eye, and I think Trump's gonna win re-election, but I think he'll lose some states back to Joe. That's how I see it going.
How about Congress? Do you think that's impacted at all?
Yeah. I think the Democrats hold the House pretty easily. I don't think that's
that's a conclusion I've had since 2018. Yeah. I think there were a lot of House members that were kind of frustrated by the Trump administration, some of the policies, some of the things he said and done, and just got out of politics in general. I mean, Texas, namely, is one where the Republicans lost a ton of congressional representatives, and I've just thought, noticing the trajectory in these past 2 years, that they don't have the resources to prop up these new candidates, these unfamiliar names, in previously Republican strongholds, and go back and flip a bunch of districts. I mean, I think it'll tighten. They might even be a net gainer in 2020, which would be a big win for them considering all the retirements that they have with the Trump boost and the fact that it's a presidential election. I lost the word for a second there. But I'm with you. I don't think they take the House.
In the Senate, I think the Democrats definitely make a net gain, but I think the Republicans cling on in enough close states as well as take back Alabama, a seat in Alabama from Doug Jones. And I'm going to be specific here, so make note of this. I think it's 49-51 Republican majority with Pence as the ultimate tiebreaker.
Really?
That's where I see it going.
So a loss of 2.
A loss of 2. I don't know which 2. I'm not confident in saying that because I think there's a few that I could reasonably make the argument for, and I don't want to pin myself down, but yeah, that's what I see happening. How about you?
Well, I'm with you there. I mean, we've talked about it on podcasts before. Arizona can be a tough hold. I mean, they got a candidate there that lost 2016, or 2018, excuse me. Same election, Senate. North Carolina is going to be tough, both for President Trump and for Tom Tillis in the Senate race. Georgia, that's a tough race. They got to hold or retake Alabama. It's work that shouldn't be work for the Republicans there. Maine, Susan Collins, Colorado. Those are all states that are purple or blue that they're trying to hold seats in. So, I think they lose 1. I think that it's 52-48 with them getting the seat back from Doug Jones, so that'd be Democrats winning 2 seats that Republicans previously held, and then the Republicans taking back Alabama to nullify it to Democrats +1. I think the Democrats keep the House. I think that one goes about even. I think either it will be the Democrats slightly gain or the Republicans slightly gain, but either way it's not going to be anything that's an overwhelming victory for one side or the other. And I think that the lead that the Democrats have is too insurmountable for Republicans. As for the presidential election, I still think Trump is going to hang on, but I'm with you. I think it's definitely a tighter race than it was going to be beforehand. I think that he will almost certainly now with the virus lose the popular vote.
Oh yeah.
And I don't think it'll be a landslide. Looking at 3 key states that he won in 2016 that he's got to maintain in 2020 in order to have that same margin of victory, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Florida. I think he probably loses 2 of them, which means that it's a very, very, very close race. But that's my prediction is he loses 2 of those states to Biden. I think he's going to be tough to beat in that Northeast area, especially the more working class Northeast area. Trump is more likely to take a swing state like New Hampshire off of Biden, I think, than a state like Michigan or Pennsylvania. And as for his VP, obviously Stacey Abrams is getting all the media attention, and I think she's certainly in consideration. But I'm not buying that hype as much as you are in terms of her actually being a realistic contender for the nomination. I think the DNC and Biden are smart enough to not make that mistake, and I think it's
I hope so.
Wishful thinking on the part of the media to prop her up. I think Whitmer's star is kind of faded as a result of her handling of the virus. A lot of the, what do they say, Michiganders?
I have no idea.
Something like that. Are upset with the way that she's handled it, with some of the ambiguity of her executive orders, with the shutting down of businesses and stuff like that. But I think she's more of a contender still, with her star fading a bit, than Stacey Abrams is right now. I guess I don't really have a name. I mean, I never could really see him picking Warren or Harris, but I mean, those are both options. I think for sure they're in contention.
Yeah, I mean, I could see him picking
I still
Harris
think that
over Warren, but
Warren's going to be AG, or Harris is going to be AG. Geez. I don't think he picks Warren.
I think Warren kind of blew it. Like, if she wanted to really be in contention, which may not have even been possible. I mean, Warren's just not the type of
There's
person.
just not a lot of connection between
Yeah.
her and Biden.
But if she wanted to, she should have endorsed him months ago. Like, she should have been one of the first ones to, maybe along with Klobuchar and Mayor Pete, or maybe just after. But I think she kind of blew her shot there by holding off for so long.
Yeah, I think if Biden was smart, he would pick Klobuchar, and he wouldn't think twice about it.
But I don't think Biden's smart.
Okay.
Sorry.
I mean, to me, she's the obvious choice. She's a moderate female. She represents, although she's not from a state that he desperately needs to win in order to flip this election, she represents that type of person. That's part of the country, you know. Being from Minnesota, she can draw a lot of connections to those Michiganders. I'm gonna keep saying it, and that makes it right.
Residents of Michigan
would
be appropriate.
The Wisconsin folks.
Wisconsiners.
I don't think that's right.
Okay.
And even, you know, as far east as the Pennsylvanians, I got that one for sure.
Yeah, I think that's right.
So, you know, I think that that's something that she can tout. She's well-spoken, she's relatively young, like I said, a female, and she has a good track record. You know, the American people like her. She's been successful in the Senate, but, I mean, she can draw votes from both sides. She's obviously very competent. I mean, I really think that for these offices of the presidency or the vice presidency, you want to look more towards governors and people that have actually managed the state than people in Congress. But I think out of the options that he really has and that have been mentioned, when you're refined to that female aspect, she's by far the best option. So I guess I'll predict that he nominates her, but I mean, to be honest, like you said, I don't know that their campaign is smart enough to do so, and they might look towards a minority woman. I mean, I haven't heard her name hardly at all, and it's also possible that she turns it down.
Yeah.
I mean, she might think that her career is better furthered by continuing to, you know, do things in the Senate, write legislation, and be at the forefront than be, you know, in the back seat of a presidency under Joe Biden, especially if she thinks that the Joe Biden presidency is going to be unsuccessful, which is certainly possible. I mean, if she declines it, we'll never know. So
I could see her thinking, you know, Joe is going to need a lot of help to run the presidency, so maybe he can be the figurehead, but I'll get a lot of the credit for running things behind the scenes. And I mean, if we're being honest, the current vice president, and I don't mean Pence, I just mean the position as a whole, doesn't really do much. But I think if you had a guy like Joe Biden at the head, the vice president would have to be someone who was hands-on and was actually in charge of making decisions and really influencing policy. And I think that might be appealing to someone like Klobuchar, who's really looking to make a name for herself. Like, you know, all the sources in the White House would say, you know, Klobuchar's doing this and that and sort of managing behind the scenes. And if it worked out, I could see that being a big plus for her. So
yeah, and if I were her, I wouldn't
it.
turn it down, not in a million years, because this is a unique opportunity that we might only see once for the vice president to effectively be, you know, running themselves as the president. Like, I think in a Biden presidency, the vice president is going to have a major role in the affairs of the White House. And so that's something that she could tout to her record and basically be president for 16 years by trying to run again and say, like, you know, all the things that the administration accomplished, this was my grunt work, you know, that went under Biden's name, and, you know, I did this, this, and this, blah, blah, blah. So, you know, maybe she'll see it that way, maybe she'll accept it, and I think ideologically there's the best connection and fit between her and Biden.
Yeah, I think that's fair. So I guess moving on to the third stage, we're just going to talk about maybe the highlights or some of the best moments we thought, or the best interviews. Well, maybe not that. Um, maybe not the best interviews, but just our final thoughts on the project. I know coming into it, I was really looking forward to interviewing people and writing articles and learning a lot more about politics, but I didn't think that my views themselves would change very much. But after interviewing Mayor Frank and interviewing Dr. Staples and Secretary Hagel and looking into politics a lot more, keeping a closer eye on it, and going back in the past to when I was young or maybe before I was born to see how these politicians acted in the past, my big takeaway is that politics is a lot less pure than I thought. Coming into this, I thought politicians were, for the most part, principled and that their voting bases wouldn't really allow for them to flip-flop too much on certain issues. But as I've kept a closer eye on it, I've become much more cynical about the nature of politics as a whole. I no longer think my presupposition is not that politicians are in it to make the country a better place or to help me or help my fellow Americans, but rather just to advance their own careers, and that wasn't the case before I started this project. So I think I've gotten a more realistic taste of politics as a result, though I must admit it is slightly disheartening.
Yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly, and I was kind of reflecting upon that throughout the years gone by. Is my opinions in the summer and the way that I viewed politics was in a very hopeful, although I guess naive manner. And I was very excited and energized about this project, and I think very quickly both of us, but certainly myself, became kind of worn down and depressed by the cycle of politics and the way you described it, unpure nature. And I would agree with you that I became a lot more cynical, and as a result, I think I was a lot less passionate about wanting to cover this stuff and actually get into the weeds of it and the nuance and stuff like that, because it just frustrated me so much. I got so sick of what was going on, and just how crappily in general everything was going, how much of the way that people interact in the political world, and the way that people behave towards one another, and the partisanship, how much I disagreed with that really just frustrated me in general. And so I certainly would say that I got a very real view of how politics work. I learned a lot more about how day-to-day interactions go and things like that, but I think that fostered a lot more dissension in terms of where our political system is, at least in my mind. And another question that Mr. Haley asked us that we talked about, and I think is worth mentioning, is he asked us if our ideology shifted at all throughout the course of this project. And I know for me it certainly has. I tried to take a very broad view of each of the issues and try to get into the nuance of both sides whenever I evaluated something. And I think that fostered sort of, a lot of times I heard a new perspective on some issue that I previously thought I had a fairly grounded stance on, and it turned out that I had my eyes opened by this new perspective that I found, and actually changed my belief. I won't go into specifics, but at least certainly for me, maybe not generally speaking my ideology changed, but certainly on specific issues I found myself with a shift in ideology.
Yeah, I think you said it well. Broadly, I had a good idea of where I stood politically. Like, I think this is how the market should be, or I think this is how this should be, and those more broad views haven't changed, but certainly issue by issue, maybe they've changed. I don't think any particular thing has really caused me to do a complete 180 and go the other way, but I've certainly done like 15s, if you will, and just slightly shifted my view on some things. In both directions too. It's not like I swayed more one way or the other. It's really an issue by issue thing. So yeah, my eyes were certainly opened to the corruption of politics, I think, is the thing that sticks with me, but also the issues. And I think the juxtaposition of those two things makes our interviews with, the good guys of politics, like Dr. Staples and Mayor Frank and Secretary Hagel, all the more impactful and meaningful to me, because you can tell, you go in the news and you see all the partisanship and the divisions and the uncooperative nature of politics, and then you sit down with these guys who seem to be in the minority, and they seem to really just be doing it to better their communities, and they don't have a personal agenda. They're just doing what they think is best for the country, and if you don't like it, you don't like it, but they all told us stories about how the establishment wanted them to do one thing, but they didn't think it was right, so they sort of dug their heels in, and they may have paid a political price for it, they may not have, but it's good to
sleep at night being proud
Yeah.
of the stances that they took, and that they felt that they were consistently doing the right thing.
Yeah.
And I think, when you interview someone that's as principled and as honorable, and as well respected as Secretary Hagel is, just to talk about him specifically, it's really eye-opening and makes him seem like even greater of a person in
Yeah.
the muck of politics that we're surrounded by now.
Yeah.
And, just speaking again more generally about this project and how I learned from it, I think that it allowed me to notice a lot more of those individuals in politics. And on both sides, I found some people that, maybe I hadn't heard of before, that now, I really have, come to appreciate the things that they've done in public service, and, will continue to follow their careers, look forward to maybe the opportunity to get to vote for them in the future.
Yeah, I'm the same way. So I guess my big takeaway is I've got a more realistic view in politics, and I've got more animosity towards who I think are the bad characters, or more surface level folks who are just there to better themselves, and those who I think are in it for the right reasons and are just there to try to make a difference for their country. And I think that's the most valuable takeaway I've had overall from the project, and that comes from both the research and the article writing, as well as the interviews. So I thought it was great.
Yeah, I'm glad we chose to do it, and I would agree with what you said, that I gained a lot more animosity towards individuals that maybe previously I hadn't been big fans of, but now I'm a lot more contemptful of like the hypocrisy that they show, or the lack of principle, or the self-centeredness, things like that. But also, on the other side of the coin, on a positive note, I've been very pleased to learn about some individuals that are doing great things in this country and deserve recognition and our votes.
Yeah. So thank you for following our project, and for all those who helped us along the way to get us those interviews, or get us the camera, or where we're recording. There were a lot of people who really listened to us for no benefit of themselves, just to help us out, and we really appreciate
helpful
that.
and tolerant and patient, and
And it wouldn't have been possible without them, and it really enriched us. I think I speak for both of us that it was a fun project, we enjoyed it, and it's going to change how we think and maybe even vote in the future. So
for the rest
it
of
was
our lives.
impactful, which I think is what the project's meant to be, and it really affected us. So signing off for the last time.